In a small town called Sebo, there lived a 7-year-old girl named Charity. She was a beautiful child with a radiant smile, but sadly, she never had a reason to smile. Her home, the place where she should have felt safest, became the source of her deepest pain. Charity lived with her parents, Mr. James and Mrs. Sharon. While her mother managed a successful fabric shop in the city, her father worked from home, creating websites for companies. Charity's nightmare began one day in her room. Her father, Mr. James, walked in and said, "Charity, I want to show you what it means to be a woman, but you must never tell anyone. This is our secret." Innocent and trusting, Charity had no idea what he meant. After all, this was her father, the man she believed would protect her. But instead of protection, Mr. James inflicted unimaginable harm on his daughter. He forced himself on her, ignoring her cries and pleas. "Daddy, please stop. Daddy, it hurts. Daddy, I'm scared," she would scream, tears streaming down her face. Yet her father showed no remorse. Charity didn't understand what was happening. All she knew was the sharp, searing pain and the fear that consumed her. Traumatized, Charity tried to escape whenever she could, but her father always caught her. She was just a child, powerless against him. At only 7 years old, her innocence had been shattered, and her days were filled with terror. You might wonder, where was Charity's mother during all of this? Mrs. Sharon was rarely home. She owned the largest fabric shop in the city, a bustling business where people came to buy wholesale. Consumed by her work and the money it brought, she was often too preoccupied to notice what was happening in her household. One day, Charity, trembling and teary-eyed, approached her mother, who was seated at the dining table surrounded by piles of invoices and cash. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice small and fearful, "why does Daddy hurt me when you're not around?" But Mrs. Sharon didn't even look up from her calculations. To her, the numbers on the table were far more important than her daughter's trembling voice. Sharon was a very business-minded woman, always focused on her shop and the flow of money. Nothing else seemed to matter to her. When Charity timidly approached her one evening with a question, Sharon barely looked up. "Charity, not now," she said, flipping through her ledger. Her attention was fixed on the neat rows of numbers. "Can't you see that I'm busy? You know how hard I work to make sure we have enough. Just go do your homework." "But Mom." Charity's voice cracked as she clutched the hem of her shirt, desperation clear in her trembling stance. "I said I am busy." Sharon snapped, finally looking up. Her eyes flashed with impatience. "You always bring up silly things when I'm trying to work. Go to your room." Charity swallowed hard, her words dying in her throat. She wanted to scream, to beg her mother to listen, but she knew it was pointless. Sharon never seemed to care about anything but the shop. Quietly, Charity turned and went to her room, her heart heavy with the burden she was forced to carry alone. Every night, Mr. James, her father, would sneak into her room. Whenever Madame Sharon was at the shop, he would do unspeakable things to Charity. He would tell her to keep it a secret, insisting he was only trying to make her feel like a woman. "But Daddy, it hurts," Charity would plead, tears streaming down her face. "I don't like it. I'm going to tell Mommy." Her father's response was always the same, a sharp, menacing threat. "If you tell anyone, you will die. Do you want to die?" Out of fear, Charity would shake her head and whisper, "No." She kept it all to herself, but deep down, she was suffocating. She needed someone to talk to, someone who would listen and care. Her father, who should have been her protector, was her tormentor. And her mother, who should have been her guardian angel, was always too busy. One evening, Charity sat at the staircase, her eyes swollen from crying. She had tried, once again, to talk to her mother, hoping this time would be different. "Mom, Can I talk to you? It's about Daddy, Charity had whispered, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the table where Sharon was counting money. Sharon didn't even glance up. What is it now, Charity? You're always complaining about something. Charity's heart pounded. She tried to muster courage, but the words stuck in her throat. It's about what Daddy does when you're not home. He. Her voice faltered, tears brimming in her eyes. I don't have time for this, Sharon said sharply, slamming a pile of cash onto the table. You're always making up stories. Daddy works hard to take care of us, and you're just trying to cause trouble, you little brat. Mom, please, Charity begged, tears streaming down her face. Please listen to me. I said enough. Sharon yelled, her patience snapping. If you're not happy here, maybe you should leave. Stop being so dramatic, you're just trying to get attention. Charity fell silent, the weight of her mother's words crushing her. She felt the walls of her world closing in, leaving her trapped in unbearable loneliness. Her mother wouldn't listen. Her father's threats loomed large. And Charity, a child desperate for help, was left to carry the unbearable pain on her own. No matter how hard Charity tried, her mother, Sharon, always shut her down. No matter how much she cried, Sharon never believed her. The one person who was supposed to protect her couldn't even see her pain. The next morning, Charity sat at the breakfast table, her eyes dull and lifeless. Sharon, already dressed for the day, slung her bag over her shoulder, meticulously organized with schedules and money. Make sure you behave today, Charity, she said, kissing the top of her daughter's head absent-mindedly, not noticing the tears welling up in her daughter's eyes. I have to meet an important client, Sharon added before leaving the house. As soon as Sharon was gone, Mr. James' demeanor shifted. His smile, meant to appear kind, made Charity's skin crawl. The man was a monster hiding in plain sight. Days turned into weeks, and the same pattern continued. Charity tried again and again to tell her mother, but Sharon was too engrossed in her work to listen. Each plea for help was dismissed as dramatics or sensitivity. Don't you see how hard I'm working? Sharon would say. You're lucky to have a roof over your head, Charity. Stop making up stories. Eventually, Charity gave up. She stopped trying to talk to her mother, stopped hoping for rescue. Her laughter faded into silence, and she retreated into herself. Life felt grey and hollow, with no one to turn to. But everything changed one fateful day. Sharon came home early from work, something she rarely did, and found Mr. Ori in Charity's room. The horrifying scene froze her in place for a moment. Mr. Ori was doing the very thing Charity had tried to warn her about. Sharon's world shattered in an instant. She screamed, shoving Mr. Ori away and clutching Charity in her arms. For the first time, she truly saw her daughter's pain, the truth she'd ignored for so long. Overcome with anguish and fury, Sharon called the authorities. Mr. Ori was taken into custody, his twisted facade stripped away. In his defense, he spewed lies, but nothing could undo the damage he had inflicted. Finally, Charity's voice was heard, but the cost of silence was a wound that would take years to heal. He said Sharon was not always available for him. Sharon was constantly busy with her business, leaving him feeling alone and in need of companionship. Can you imagine such a defense, dear viewers? Is that truly an excuse? Charity was taken for counseling, where she slowly began to heal from the deep trauma she had endured for so long. Meanwhile, Sharon, overwhelmed with guilt, quit her job and dedicated herself to rebuilding her relationship with her daughter. She learned the hard way that money and business could never replace the love and care a child needs. As for Mr. Ori, the monstrous father, he was sentenced to life in prison, where he spent the rest of his days behind bars. The moral of this story is simple: always listen to those who come to you with their pain, especially children. Ignoring their cries for help can lead to even greater suffering. You never know the depth of what someone might want to share with you. No amount of money or success is worth losing the people you love. Thank you so much for listening to this story.